14 MLB teams might be out of a spot to have their games during the MLB season, but the owners are looking for a reform to get that fixed and maybe some CBA questions all the way to 2026. They're working on them now. Let's talk about it here on the OK Baseball podcast. What a juicy topic we have for you today. Welcome into the show, the OK Baseball Podcast, episode number 12. Look at us just rolling around and just rolling along, I should say, as we are getting closer and closer to opening day. We are now in spring training, but something really interesting popped up on the feeds. We had to get an extra episode, an extra little short one in for you today. I don't know if I want to keep calling these bonus episodes, Sean, because we're going to start giving you content on this page almost every single day once baseball season really starts. So let's just call it just good old episode 12. But there was a interesting article that came out in The Athletic this week from Evan Drelix, and he talks about how the MLB is now creating an economic reform committee because of the Bally Sports possible bankrupt. And of course, he had to throw in the overspending. And I will definitely put that in air quotes for the entirety of my life on this show, of Mets spending Steve Cohen, how he was deciding to spend all this money. We're going to have an economic reform. Sounds like some of the owners are not very happy with that spending. Let's talk about first, before we get to the Cohen conversation. And I'll obviously let you talk here in just a minute. I know your lips aren't glued to each other, but let's talk about first the Diamond Sports Group. It's the parent company of 19 Bally Sports channels. If you've watched baseball last year, or the last couple of years, you've noticed that it's no longer Fox Sports that is covering, Fox Sports Ohio, for example. It switched over to Bally Sports. Well, Bally Sports is held underneath the Diamond Sports Group, and it looks like they're about to come bankrupt. So there is a possibility that 14 MLB teams that are hosted under those 19 channels will not have a spot to go for their every 162 games this season. It seems like they have some kind of contingency plans. Manfred likes to call himself Mr. Contingency, which I don't know if that's the right thing you should call yourself. However, Sean, welcome into the show. Only 3 minutes deep, and let's discuss this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some names for Rob Manfred myself if he's interested in really finding a moniker that sticks. But this is fascinating to me, like the whole idea of regional coverage of sports teams and stuff like that has become such a mess, if you ask me, over the last few years. And Major League Baseball is scrambling, for lack of a better term. And I think what you're going to see is, as those deals become more and more questionable, Major League Baseball is going to look to, I think it might be even in their best interest, to move toward just owning all of their broadcasting, period. But that's going to cause some other owners to lose their over their own contracts, because there's some hefty contracts around baseball that some teams may not want to give up on. So that, to me, is where this becomes really interesting. It's how do you look out for the health of the league and the broadcasting rights of the league, and still respect the individual teams and their deals moving forward. That's what's going to be fascinating to me.
Yeah, both these topics, one about a bankruptcy, sports group, and one about an overspending owner, really come in tandem. They're really tied together, because it seems like some of the owners are upset about both of these issues that are happening because of the revenue issue. Obviously, when it comes to the issues that are going on with Bally Sports, that impacts a lot of those teams' revenue lines. Now, on the other side, with Cohen, him overspending also impacts it as well. Let's talk about that just in a moment. But let's continue on here with this 14 teams that could be impacted by this. Manfred says we got to find a new model. Maybe we ought to be driving the boat, what that model looks like. So that's the new challenge. I just don't, when he says things, he sounds like he's just going around the actual problem. It doesn't really seem like he's discussing it. He's very good at making the media ask questions and have to write articles like this and make us have to do our job. However, it doesn't seem like he is helping us get to the answer of the problem. This now, for the record, this is an owner's issue. This is not a commissioner's issue. But it really seems, as someone who speaks on behalf of the owners, he's not giving the information that we need right away.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that he says he wants to be driving the boat. And, like I just picture him just taking over a boardroom and saying, "I'm the captain now,"
Right.
and just like, this is what we're going to do, boys. And I don't know, man, whether or not he's the right spokesperson, that's a whole other episode, I feel. But it is interesting that he, in when he speaks, you do have to kind of dig deep and dig through all of the nothing to get to something. And he did say that, what did he say here? I think that people see it as an opportunity to rethink the revenue side of the house a little bit, which has been hard in our sport. Okay. Yeah, I feel so badly for you. Anyway, but then he said that people are entrenched in their local media dynamics, right? In their local contracts and stuff like that. And it's very difficult to get people, it sounds like anyway, to get people to think beyond their own individual interests and their individual local contracts. But that really, that's a problem that ownership created. And now they're struggling with how to navigate out of it, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And you talk about that media dynamics and trying to find a new kind of style. I immediately point to the NBA or the NFL, if you will, but I think the NBA does it amazing. And I know that we shouldn't really speak on, the things about Trevor Bauer. We know that stuff happened, but he did say something interesting in one of his momentum speeches when he talked about Manfred, about how they're not progressing the game with social media. So I want to just take that aspect. If you remember that conversation he had, how we talked about that they don't allow certain things to be put out on Twitter or put out on YouTube. They're getting a little better on that behalf. But if you look at the NBA, and if you follow any kind of NBA or NFL things on social media, it is so easy to see a touchdown, a dunk, any crazy thing, any highlight that pops up. It is super difficult if you don't have MLB TV or you don't have a cable package to find a home run that was hit by Jose Abreu or an amazing double play that was turned by the Braves or something like that. It's just completely hard to do. You can't find that unless somebody does it illegally on social media. And then once that happens, its copyright is taken down. So you only have a brief moment to get that found, unless the official MLB account does that. That needs to change as well. If you want to talk about media dynamics, in my opinion, you need to let some of these smaller content creators, let them push the game, let them help out. You want to find the youth to love this game more. That is a perfect way to start, because the youth loves the short attention span, these shorts, these the gaming, stuff like that. Get some of these young creators that maybe work with MLB The Show or with the video game, or just outside of that as well. Be able to create something like a Dinger Report where they talk about the best home runs of the day and let them use your quality content, something cool like that, right? That's a start. That's just one start. Here you go, Manfred. Write that down. There's something for your Mr. Contingency plan. But what I find very interesting as well, and you said that the owners, they don't seem to be getting outside of their dynamic. If you look at the group that's going to be in charge of this Economic Reform Committee, which sounds so real big time, right? Sounds like it's going to be just a really, we're going to get stuff done because listen, it's called the Economic Reform Committee. Well, it's headed by Mark Walters, the Dodgers, which initially sounds really, really interesting. Okay, maybe it's on the right path. The Dodgers is one of the largest sports markets teams in all of baseball. Maybe he's going to help look out for the smaller companies, help be able to distribute it. And then you look at what's next. Chris Ilitch of the Tigers, John Henry of the Red Sox, Dick Monfort of the Rockies. Well, I don't know if Dick Monfort's going to be in there. Again, we're going to have to throw this out there. He still thinks his team can play 500 baseball. Now, do you think he's going to be able to get anything done here? Because it sounds like he's already lost in the sauce before the season's even started. But maybe he's focusing on some other issues. Maybe he's worried about his pocketbook. When you look at this, though, the Rockies and the Tigers also really still not scream big market teams. And then you have the Dodgers and the Red Sox that's kind of scream big market teams, especially the Dodgers. Boston's up there as well. So you kind of have a nice split that's chairing the committee as committee members. What kind of impact do you think this is going to be for all the owners if you kind of see this split trying to figure out how to get past and get ready to improve this revenue for all 30 MLB teams.
Yeah, it's a it's an interesting group in the mix because, like as you said, you have two teams that are big spenders, but the Tigers haven't exactly been cheap throughout their history. They've gone through periods of big spending and championship runs, and that's not like ancient history either. That's recent. So it's interesting to me because on the surface it does kind of look like two small market teams and two big market teams. The Rockies, I just why, that to me is why is Dick Monfort in this conversation? Obviously, there are conversations behind the scenes, when they poll owners and things like that. Who wants to be part of this committee? I would imagine he jumped at that chance, just kind of as an outsider. I would get that impression. But the inclusion of the Rockies is an interesting one. I would be on, in all honesty, I would love to see a representative from the Rays in there as well. A team that has very little in the way of payroll flexibility like the Mets do, but also is putting a winning product on the field and yet still can't fill their stadium. That to me has got to be, if you want to talk about economic reform, the Rays have to be in that conversation just for the very unique situation that they represent.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would love to see someone from the Tampa Bay Rays in there because, as we've noticed, they never spend over the salary cap threshold. Or not salary cap. We take that back. We don't have one of those. Even we're going to talk about that in just a second. But the luxury tax threshold, and if they do, it's by just a small margin. But they still have a competitive team on the field. We just saw them in the World Series a few seasons back. They are very fantastic in scouting. They know how to do all the important things for baseball at a baller on a budget price. So having that kind of input into this conversation does seem like a really good idea. I think there are missing and dropping the ball on that one as well. Let's get one more thing about this digital thing. 14 teams could be on the loop of not being in the regional homes of their fans. That's a really big deal as we're talking almost a month out of opening day. And there's a possibility that there might not be a Bally Sports come March 30th on opening day. That is a huge issue. That is a huge issue that is not being talked about enough. And I think that it's not being talked about enough because Manfred says they have a contingency plan. And their contingency plan states that they're going to just really push it digital. I mean, they do have MLB TV. They do have that. They can lift the blackout restrictions. If they don't have a Bally Sports, there is no blackout restrictions, technically, right? However, I don't know if that's something they're interested in doing because it seems like if he was quoted last week how he wasn't focused on the people with the blackouts. He said that wasn't something that they were really focused on. What does this contingency plan mean then? What does them going digital? Does it just them following MLB TV? Does it them get more games to Apple TV, which seemed to be kind of a success? Some people were really upset with it because they didn't have the plan. But you can't go fully digital if you already have a contract with Apple. Did someone like Amazon come into play more? YouTube. We've seen different streaming platforms come in and take certain MLB games. Do you think some of these are on the line talking to Manfred in the MLB community and saying, hey, if this happens, if this drops, we're ready to come in? Or does MLB want nothing to do with that and take over it for themselves? What do you think they should do and what do you think is going to happen? Because it could be two different things.
Right. That's a fascinating conversation. I think what they should do is take over everything themselves, and that would have to mean getting rid of blackouts first of all. And I understand that there are contracts in play, so those contracts have to be lived up to. But this is a perfect opportunity for Major League Baseball to just take control of everything, to take control of their product. That's what they should do. And this is coming from a Blue Jays fan who when you order MLB TV, Blue Jays games are blacked out. Like it makes no sense, right? So that's the kind of, I guess, the ire that draws this opinion. But That's what they should do. What are they going to do? Major League Baseball has made it very clear they want to own their product. They want to control their product. They don't want anybody else the ability to even, as you said, share a little clip or this, that, and the other thing. They want complete control of it, and that's been problematic. That's why they can't grow the game. Like you mentioned, like the NBA can, because Major League Baseball has been so worried about collecting everything and holding on to everything and protecting their own rights that they are completely missing the big picture. So if they do take control, I worry. In all honesty, because that means nobody is going to be able to enjoy it to the full extent that other leagues do. So I don't trust Major League Baseball and their ownership groups to be able to I guess to hold everything in their own grasp and share it with the world, because they don't know how, and
Yeah.
we've seen that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're 100% right. I want to find a way to let MLB have more of the push. So they can help their revenue, help their smaller owners, because it is a problem right now. We do notice that there is some sort of problem, the disparity. We saw that word a million times in Evan's article, the word disparity. And honestly, there was not a time where it didn't belong there. There is a huge disparity between teams, especially like when we're talking about teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees, and then we're talking about teams like the Miami Marlins and the Oakland Athletics, right? There's issues. There's issues with some of those teams. And I know I said the Oakland A's. I think that might be the last time we say the word Oakland. It'll probably say Vegas sooner than later. Let's talk about, there's a possibility that there's this headbutting going on with owners because of the new owners that are coming in, trying to make dynamic changes, drastic changes. And obviously the one that comes to mind right off the bat is Steve Cohen of the New York Mets. And you have to think of Steve Cohen right away, because he is really changing the entire landscape of Major League Baseball and how we look at the game. Look at what he's done with his payroll just over the last few seasons. Entering 2023, he has a projected payroll of roughly $370 million. That's a record. They entered in the last CBA a Steve Cohen tax that was at $293 million. He's crushing that by almost $100 million. He's going to have almost, I think, $90 million worth of taxes that he's going to have to pay. I think it's actually more than that, Sean, for this season, just in the luxury tax alone. It's absolutely insane, but he doesn't seem to care, because he wants to put a competitive team on the field. He wants to challenge these owners to start doing that as well. He knows a guy like Steve Cohen, and I applaud Steve Cohen, I really do. He understands that in order to grow the game, in order to make money, you got to spend money. And he's doing just that. We saw the Mets go from a team with the Wilpons that were not very good a few seasons ago to last year winning 100 and something games. Obviously, they choked in the playoffs, but that's not a Steve Cohen issue. He put a fantastic roster on the field, and they did exactly what they needed to do and win over 100 games. There's some headbutting going on with some of the older owners and the newer owners. How does that come into play with this new reform committee? And we also see in this article that they're already talking things about getting ready for the new CBA in 2026. Is it too early to start talking about that? Or do you think it's a good idea that they're starting to get that ideas down now?
Yeah, I think we've got two issues there: the Cohen issue, and then the getting your ducks in a row behind the scenes. First of all, it's Steve Cohen. This is every fan's dream owner.
Yeah.
Do whatever it takes. Put your money, not mine, but that's going to get passed on. Let's be real here. Like there are revenue sources that go up, ticket prices, so on and so on. $800 beer, whatever it is. There are ways to recoup that. But you put your money where your mouth is and tell me that you want a winning team on the field. That's what every fan wants, and that's what Mets fans are getting. That's what Padres fans are getting. Dodgers fans, and it's kind of necessary from a fan perspective. That's how you win. Now, so I don't really have an issue with Steve Cohen and all the owners that have an issue with Steve Cohen. I think the issue more resides with them. Why aren't they spending? Why aren't they using the competitive balance of money that's been spread around? Why aren't they using their TV contracts? All of that money that Major League Baseball is generating, and it's just like flying around. I picture it like one of those contest games where you lock yourself in a booth and then the wind starts going and blowing money around, right? And it's a cash grab, and some teams are just sitting there with their hands in their pockets. And so why? That's my question. Why are teams really pissed off with Steve Cohen? If I'm an owner of, say, the Oakland Athletics, why am I pissed off? It's got nothing to do with Steve Cohen. What my issues in Oakland, those have everything to do with the situation in Oakland. It's not Steve Cohen's fault. However, I can see, like, well, I'll never be able to compete with a Steve Cohen. And that's where you get owners kind of butting heads. And this is where getting your ducks in a row are important, because you have to have the ownership on side when you enter into contract negotiations, and better to do it 3 years ahead of time, because if you wait and you continue to let this fester, you're going to have ownership split, and then you can't enter negotiations because you can't even agree amongst yourselves.
Yeah, the last thing we need is another lockout in 2026.
Right.
Looking forward in 2026, they do need 23 votes from the owners to pass. Now, who knows if that's 23 out of 30 or 23 out of 32 by the time 2026 happens. We might have an expansion. I hope we do. I hope that is the case. I would love to see an expansion. However, regardless, 23 out of 30 is what they need currently. It states in this article that Steve Cohen, what he has done, new owners like Steve Cohen, I should say, what he has done to baseball right now has infuriated the rest of the owners enough to where if they had a CBA today, they would not have those 23 votes. And it is far off, which is very interesting. So I agree with you. They do need to have their ducks in a row. One thing that keeps coming up, though, to try and figure out this revenue and get them the disparity between the teams back, and it always comes up, and I'm sure that it'll come up until we get to the end of the contract, the end of the CBA in 2026. And then when it doesn't happen, it'll start again. We'll talk about it all the way until the next CBA, is a salary cap and a salary floor. Now, if you remember, or if you did not follow baseball back then, let me remind you, in 1994, the biggest reason why the biggest problem in 94 with the huge thing going on with the lockout, the strike, was because of a salary cap. It didn't happen. The players didn't want anything in it. It became owner versus owner. It was not a good thing. There's this feeling that we're going down this road again, and I think that's why they're trying to get ahead of it with this 3 years ahead, to try to get the 23 votes and get all the owners, or at least the majority of the owners, on the same page. But we have to ask the question, is the salary cap in our future? Do you see that happening again, or maybe even a minimum salary as a floor, if you will, to try and battle back with the players to make that kind of, that conversation work, a floor, a cap? And do you think if that happens, is that something that will bring disparity away from the game and make these teams equal? Will we see a team like the Miami Marlins be able to compete with the Los Angeles Dodgers on the same level because they'll be the same kind of salary cap? Do you think that's even a good idea? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's funny that the salary cap is the first kind of place people go, and to the point where, like, all these teams maybe lose all of their revenue from the Bally Sports issue and all of that stuff, and they're losing revenue, and so we need to stop the big guys from spending. But I'm not sure that that's a logical leap for for anybody to make. That what really, for me, the issue is you need a salary floor. I think that's the real issue, because a salary cap is not going to fix anything. Let's say the Mets cap it at 300 million, because it's going to be high, right? Because the players won't agree to anything. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, it's $300 million. If the Mets are at their $300 million and Shohei Ohtani is sitting out there, are they not going to spend on him? Okay, we're at our cap, sorry. So then you're going to go to somebody like Miami, who has the money, the cap space, but are they really going to spend that money? That you have to force the owners to spend the money to even get up to to that cap before it even becomes an issue. That cap will work for a small number of teams. That's all it will do. It will not bring the rest of the league up with those other teams. So that's the real problem. And the only way I think you fix that is through a salary floor. You force teams to spend money, and share the wealth. So maybe Shohei Ohtani ends up playing in a team that nobody expected, like the Marlins or the Diamondbacks or something like that, because they're now spending money, they're competing for those top free agents, which means they plan on competing on the field as well. And that's the big difference. As long as teams are allowed to rebuild for 8-9 years and excuse me, and not sign those free agents or turn their prospects into more prospects later on and sell them off like Oakland does, as long as teams are allowed to do that, you're going to have this issue. So it's not a Steve Cohen issue, it's an everybody else get your ass in gear issue.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'm glad you brought up Shohei Ohtani's name with this conversation, because if they do add a salary cap, what does that do for international players? Do international players come over still? Do they find that the incentive is worth to leave their home country to play baseball in the MLB, and not just countries like Japan? I mean, a lot of the players in Latin America also have that issue as well, or they come up and they play baseball, they make some money, and does that happen still if there's a salary cap? Do they see that incentive there? Or does another league outside the MLB take them in and say, look, we can spend or pay more money, come on over to us? It could really impact the game. It really could.
Mm-hmm.
There's one more thing that comes up with Rob Manfred. He says, what has happened among ownership is that they realize that as we go more digital, there's an opportunity for us to become a more national product. The fact that he sent this quote out in 2023 frustrates me and concerns me. We're in 2023. We have been digital. I mean, we have been completely digital in streaming service for over a decade. Why is this a conversation now? Why is this a quote right now by the commissioner of Major League Baseball? This shows a lot of issues by some of these owners. And I'm going to point at some of these older owners that they are afraid to leave their regional areas, just like you stated. And they're not willing to make this whole thing a national product, which it needs to be. There's a lot of issues. And it seems like some of these owners either maybe need to just move on, sell the team, or get it down to maybe their younger sons or daughters or whatever. And maybe even to another extent, we need a younger, more dynamic commissioner that is not afraid to push these kind of agendas. It seems like a guy like Manfred doesn't really know what he's talking about, this digital stuff, and it's been around for a decade and a half. This is really frustrating.
Yeah, I just could picture him like his next press conference after this committee has gotten together, and we are going to harness the power of the internet. Like, oh, the internet, good job. Anyway, yeah, it's frustrating. I agree, because they have all the tools and the abilities and the technology. Teams are spending a fortune on wrap soda machines and things like that, and rightfully so. I'm not criticizing that. However, part of your growth as an organization is also spending money on your marketing. And right now, Rob Manfred cannot lead a marketing team, and it's unfortunate. But he is elected into that role by the owners. They put him there. So maybe he is just kind of like the mouthpiece of the whole group.
Easily.
Right? So that, to me, it points to the fact that there's a problem with ownership. And I agree with you that whether it's they're just so stuck in their contracts and they find those contracts, to be lucrative as opposed to limiting, because their focus is their little piece of the pie as opposed to the whole pie. Or maybe it's just they're not with the times. I don't know. Whatever that is, whatever the case is, it's unfortunate, because Major League Baseball is going to fall behind. Like they have the greatest product in the world. That's why we talk about it. That's why we're doing this show. They have the greatest product in the world, and they are losing the attention. And their solution is to fix the game, change the game, but they're not changing anything to do with their own marketing and their own ability to grow the game on their side of things, right? Like talking about, let's get the financial side of the house. Well, if that's all you ever focus on, you're not going to grow. You're not going to turn this into a bigger thing than it already is. People love baseball, and people get excited about baseball. And Major League Baseball, the entity, kind of works against that. It's insane.
100%. If MLB wants to go completely digital and own their own brand completely outright, let's say that the Apple TV contract doesn't exist, the YouTube, anything like that, Blackouts need to go 100%. They need to be gone.
Yeah.
There needs to be 30 teams, 32 teams, whatever the case is, once we get to this kind of thing where if you can watch it in Canada, you can watch it in Baltimore, you can watch it in Atlanta, no matter game you want to watch, it is available to you. You need to get every team on board, meaning that every team has to be part of just that streaming deal. If some of those bigger teams like a Los Angeles or New York want to stay with like the Yankees, if the Yankees don't want to come into that and they want to continue with the Yes Network, this will not work. You have to have all teams on board for that to happen. And that seems like a big stretch for some of these owners who know they get a huge revenue. I mean, how the Yankees have their own network in the area of New York, the Yes Network. It's absolutely insane. And then we have some teams who rely on Bally Sports. Almost half of the league relies on a company that is about to go bankrupt. The fact that we're not talking about this enough is why we felt like a bonus episode was absolutely needed. And it seems like why they feel a committee was needed for reform. We're going to see if that happens. Obviously, of course, this is clear that MLB owners are unhappy, at least some of them, about what's going on in the league. Some of them are unhappy for the wrong reasons, in our opinion. Some are changing the way that we think about the game for all the right reasons. Once again, thank you, Steve Cohen. Continue what you're doing. Keep stirring the pot. Keep making things an absolute ruckus because that's absolutely what we need. Change to happen. You need a change agent like Steve Cohen to come in and really make a big difference. And this is why we're talking about this right now, because if we didn't have a Steve Cohen, they'd be completely content to where they're at. And they'd say, well, they'll just come out in the wash. And it's not going to happen. We're going to have more new owners like Cohen come in and keep messing it up. This is exactly what we need for baseball. But right now, it's going to get probably a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
All right. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about this? Do you think anything's going to change? If you're one of the fans of a team that is under Bally Sports, are you nervous about not being able to see your games this year? And what do you think you're going to be watching all 162 teams or 162 games of your season this year? Because it's still up in the air and we're only a month away. So let us know all your thoughts in the comment description below. If you're listening in podcast form, thank you so much. Please give us 5 stars wherever you're listening. It really helps us out as we're continuing to grow and looking forward to getting 1,000 subscribers soon on YouTube. And we're trying to get all of our ratings here. So thank you so much as listening. We'll see you back here for another episode of the OK Baseball Podcast.